A drunk father was forcibly shaving his daughter in market when a cowboy shot at his razor. In a town where silence hides more than sin, a scarred cowboy crosses paths with a girl bound by fear and a father broken beyond reason. Their lives collide in a moment no one speaks of, but everyone remembers. In a land where law comes second to legacy, some lines, once crossed, can't be uncut. There's a kind of hush that settles over a frontier town when the kettle's on and boots are by the fire. Folks say time moves slower out west, but love, well, that never does. 3 months earlier, autumn 1878, Willow Creek, Montana Territory. The wind carried frost and gossip alike, and Clara Whitmore, Mayor's daughter, sharp as a spooked colt, had just climbed out her bedroom window. Again, no corset, no escort. Just a scarf, a plan, and a boy the town didn't much approve of. They called it wildness. She called it freedom. And on that night, under a harvest moon, she chose him. Sometimes the family you choose is the one fate blows in with the storm. Ain't no planning for it, ain't no map or mercy to it neither. Just comes down out of nowhere, mean and howling and colder than a debt come due. Men build fences and fires thinking they'll keep the world out. But out here, the world don't knock. It just takes. They say the land don't forget. Maybe it don't forgive either. There's a kind of silence up in the high places. Not peace. No, peace is warmer than this. This is the kind of quiet that hums in your teeth, that weighs on your bones. The kind that remembers every word you didn't say, every face you buried and tried to leave behind. Some men come to the mountains to trap, some to hide, some just walk till they run out a road. Me, I didn't come looking for anything. But it found me just the same. There's a wind up here that don't belong to no season, carries ghosts in it, and if you listen close, you'll hear 'em talking, not in words, but in ache, in things left undone. So when the storm rolled down off that ridge and I saw 'em, woman, 2 young'uns, half frozen and lost, I knew right then. That storm wasn't just weather, it was the past. Coming home. Snow crunched beneath his boots like bones under boot heel. Morning light cut cold across the slope, blue and sharp, making the pines look brittle. He moved slow, deliberate, hat low, coat thick with frost at the shoulders, axe over one shoulder like a hanging sentence. Didn't matter if it was Christmas Eve or Judgment Day. Up here every day was just cold and work. He split wood out back till his knuckles cracked, the kind of cold that lived inside you, the kind that didn't thaw with fire. The cabin sat quiet behind him, half sunk into the hillside, like it too was trying to forget it had ever been a home. Smoke leaked from the chimney lazy-like, no urgency in it. The sound of the axe hooed off nothing. Even the birds had the sense to leave. He didn't talk, not out loud, not to himself. There was no need. Words were things for other people. He'd left most of his behind on a wagon road 6 winters ago, somewhere between the last grave and the first bottle. There was a grave behind the cabin, just one, a crude wooden cross leaning like it had rather fall down. He didn't look at it, didn't brush off the snow, just passed it each morning like it was a tree stump, like it wasn't the one thing that still held him tethered to this world. Inside, the fire barely lit the room. Everything smelled of pine, smoke, and quiet. A kettle hissed on the stove. He sat at the table with a tin cup, steam curling upward like ghost breath. His fingers rested on a small box carved from birch, smooth with use. The lid hadn't been opened in over a year, maybe 2. He picked it up, turned it in his hands like a weight he hadn't earned, then set it back down. A faded child's drawing hung near the hearth, crude lines, a house, a stick man, a dog. He didn't take it down, couldn't throw it away. But he didn't look at it either, not for long, just enough to know it still hurt. Out the window, the wind stirred the treetops like they were whispering things no man ought to hear. This wasn't peace. This was exile. And he bore it same as he bore the cold, without complaint, without comfort, without end. The wind picked up around noon. Not the usual mountain wind, not the steady whistle that came through the pines like a tired song. This one came hard, carried weight behind it, sharp and mean, By sundown, the sky had gone the color of lead, and the trees were bending like they'd sinned. He bolted the door without thinking, threw another armload of wood into the firebox, and checked the window seals. A storm was coming, and not the kind you could wait out with tea and a blanket. This was a whiteout, a howler, the kind that erased things. He sat in his chair with the rifle across his lap, not because of wolves or thieves, but because old habits don't freeze easy. Snow started thumping the roof like fists. The wind screamed down the chimney, searching. The fire spat and hissed. Then, something. Not a sound so much as a break in the sound. A gap, like breath held too long. He stood, crossed to the door, paused. Another thump. Not the wind. Lower. Closer. He pulled the door open just enough to let the storm try to take it off the hinges. Snow slammed against him, blinding, needles in the eyes. For a second, there was nothing. Then, movement. A shadow stumbling through the white. A figure. Then two smaller ones behind it, staggering, falling. He didn't call out, didn't ask who they were, just stared. The woman collapsed first, half dragging the little ones. One child, a girl, cried out sharp and scared. The boy didn't cry, just fell face first into the drift. He moved. They were ice under his hands, flesh stiff, skin pale. He dragged the woman by the arms through the snowdrift and into the cabin, then went back for the children. The girl was shivering, her lips blue. The boy didn't move. He kicked the door shut with his boot and dropped the bar. Inside, the fire blazed. He laid them near it, peeled wet coats, pried off frozen boots. The girl's teeth chattered like a rattler. The woman blinked but didn't speak. The boy finally let out a faint, broken cough. He worked silent, fast. Hot water, blankets, a wool shirt for the boy. His hands weren't gentle, but they were sure. The cabin steamed with melting snow and breath and firelight. Still no one spoke. The wind howled against the walls like it was trying to get in and finish what it started. Inside, the fire cracked steady and the cabin steamed with thawing bodies. Wet clothes hung from pegs and chairs. The smell of smoke and damp wool mixed in the air. It felt like a waiting room between life and something colder. The boy, Tommy, sat close to the hearth, swaddled in a wool blanket down to his nose, eyes wide and unblinking. The girl, Clara, rested beside him on a bedroll, her cheeks pinking with the fire's touch. She kept looking at him, the man who'd carried them in, like he might turn into something else if she blinked. The woman was the last to speak. "Eliza," she said, voice scratchy like dry leaves. "Name's Eliza." He didn't offer his, just nodded once and ladled stew into 3 tin bowls. Rabbit and potato. Not much seasoning, but hot. They ate slow, like they didn't trust it yet. The children huddled together on the floor, sharing heat, elbows bumping as they shoveled the food down with quiet hunger. Eliza sat at the table. He stood, arms crossed, watching them all like a man watching wolves too close to the fire. "You got kin nearby?" he asked finally. Eliza shook her head. "Not no more." He didn't ask again. The storm outside hadn't let up. Wind screamed down the chimney and rattled the shutters like a warning. Still the fire held. They didn't talk after supper, just the hiss of the kettle and the pop of sap in the logs. He laid out a second bedroll for the kids near the hearth, gave Eliza the cot, took the floor himself. In the firelight, Tommy whispered something to Clara. She giggled, soft and warm, like it didn't belong in a place like this. Eliza watched them, then looked to him. "You alone up here?" she asked. He nodded. "For how long?" "Long enough." He didn't say more, neither did she. But there was something in her look. Not pity, not thanks. Just knowing. Later, as they all settled into the hush of the storm and the fire's lull, Clara crept up and set something on his knee. A little wooden doll, rough-carved, weathered, not his. She didn't say a word, just gave it to him and crawled back to her blanket. He stared at it a long time. In the quiet, Something shifted. Not loud, not sudden. Just the kid, and of change a man feels in his bones. The cabin was warm now, but the cold hadn't left. It had just moved inside. The storm held for 3 days. Snow piled higher than the windowsills, wind carving drifts against the walls like it meant to keep them there for good. The cabin groaned in the night, the kind of sound that makes you wonder if it remembers the weight of time or just the people it's lost. He kept to the same routine: fire, wood, water, stew, but everything changed all the same. Tommy followed him outside one morning, bundled thick and dragging a too-big boot. Didn't say a word, just watched him split kindling, head tilted like a pup watching its father work. The boy held out a stick, thin as a finger, not useful, but offered like a treasure. He took it. Inside, Clara started drawing on scraps of brown paper, charcoal rubbed from the edge of the stove. Stick figures, trees, a dog. One morning she handed him a page, a man, tall, beside a cabin, 2 small ones beside him, a son, lopsided, a woman, further off. He pinned it above the mantel without a word. At night, Eliza would sit across from him at the table's same spot each time. Her fingers wrapped around a tin cup, knuckles red from cold and wear. She never talked much, just watched the fire like it might explain something she hadn't figured yet. He found himself telling stories. Not good ones. Dry things. How to patch a roof, when to trap mink, how to keep wolves from circling too close to camp. But they listened, and he kept talking. Clara nodded like it was scripture. Tommy just watched, wide-eyed and solemn. Once, he mentioned his son without meaning to. Said the boy used to mend traps with him when he was near Tommy's age. Said it like a passing fact, but the room stilled when he did. Eliza looked at him then, real long, but didn't press. She just sipped her drink, and he knew she understood more than she let on. She was running from something. He could see it in the way she flinched when the wind kicked up sudden, or how she kept a knife close even inside the cabin, not afraid of him, but of something that had teeth and memory. Tommy started calling him Mr. No name, just that. But it stuck. The boy would tug his sleeve when hungry, say, "Mr. Fire's low," or "Mr. Clara's cold." He never corrected him. Sometimes at night he'd hear Eliza get up, light footsteps. She'd stand by the fire just staring. He'd pretend to sleep, not out of rudeness, just respect. Some griefs don't take company. The cross behind the cabin stayed buried under snow. He didn't look at it, not once. But Clara asked, "Is there someone under there?" He just nodded. She didn't ask who. The days passed like smoke. Nothing grand, just meals shared, wood split, laughter creeping in like it wasn't sure it belonged. It felt like something old trying to be new. But every time they sat at the table, every time the soup was ladled and the fire warmed their hands, he saw them, the ghosts. Not the kind with rattling chains, the kind that sat quiet, just watching. A boy with sandy hair, a woman with wind-burned cheeks, smiling, silent. And somehow, the silence at that table said more than words ever could. The storm broke without warning, same way it came. One morning the wind simply stopped. The cabin sat wrapped in silence so deep it pressed against the ribs. Sunlight came down clean and cold, sharp enough to cut. The sky was the kind of blue that only comes after a thing's done its worst. He stepped outside, boots crunching through hard-packed snow. The world was still. Trees hung heavy with ice, and the snow shone like glass. For the first time in a long while, it didn't feel like the mountain was trying to kill him. Inside, Eliza had already started packing. He came in with firewood under one arm, paused when he saw her rolling the blankets tight, folding the children's spare clothes, these neat as prayer cloth. "We're leaving tomorrow," she said. Not soft, not harsh, just fact. He didn't say anything, set the wood down by the hearth. Clara looked up from where she was drawing again, this time a horse and 3 people. She didn't smile. Tommy didn't say a word, just kept turning the doll in his hands. Eliza didn't explain herself, didn't owe him that. He didn't ask. But when night came and the fire burned low, he stood just outside their door a long while, listening. She tucked them in, whispered something about just a few more miles and "You'll sleep warm again." He leaned his forehead to the doorframe. Maybe the silence had gotten too quiet. Next morning, he saddled the old mare, brushed her down, cinched the saddle tighter than need be. The air was still cold, but it didn't bite the way it used to. When he walked back in, Eliza was lacing Clara's boots. "You headed south?" he asked. "Eventually." He looked at her, not at the kids. "There's a spring on the ridge. Game runs good in the gully. Got seed stored, tools. Land's yours if you want it." She studied him, said nothing. "I ain't asking out of love," he added. "Just sometimes it's easier to survive when you ain't doing it alone." She didn't nod, didn't shake her head. She just looked around the cabin, at the fire, the hooks by the stove where Tommy hung his cup, the charcoal drawings tacked to the beam. Later, after the kids were asleep and the moon cast silver through the frost-laced window, she unrolled her blankets again. Didn't say a word. Didn't need to. The trail into town was dust and thaw, the kind that clings to boots and won't let go. Snow still slept in the hollows, but the sun had come back strong, turning everything soft and muddy. The wagon creaked beneath them, pulled by a tired bay gelding. Eliza held the reins. The children sat between them, wide-eyed, fidgeting, cleaned up best they could. He rode a ways behind on horseback, keeping quiet watch. It had been 2 months since the storm, long enough to, plant potatoes, mend fences, and find a rhythm, not long enough for the past to forget how to whisper. The town hadn't changed. Main Street was the same row of sun-faded storefronts and men with narrow eyes under wide brims. When the wagon rolled in, heads turned. They didn't speak, not at first, just looked. At her, at the children, then at him, like ghosts come back in the flesh. The general store was the first stop. Eliza went inside with Clara, left Tommy in the wagon with a peppermint stick in his hand and dust on his boots. The boy sat like he belonged there. He dismounted slow, loosened his shoulders, no gun drawn, no need, but his hand didn't stray far from his hip. The lawman came out from the sheriff's office, eyes sharp under a grey hat. Marshal Reed. Old enough to remember him, young enough to think about asking questions. "You back then?" Reed said, like it wasn't a question. "I ain't here to cause trouble," he answered. "Just need seed, flour, boots for the boy." Reed glanced toward the store window, where Eliza stood holding a bag of sugar and a quiet kind of tension. "That woman ain't yours," the marshal said. "She ain't nobody's," he replied. They left it at that. Across the street, a preacher stepped out of the chapel, collar straight, mouth already pursed. A woman with a baby turned her back. A man by the saloon spat in the dust. "She's running from something," someone muttered. "So's he," another replied. Tommy ran to the candy counter. Clara asked about school, touching a slate board with reverent fingers. Eliza met his eyes as she stepped out with a sack over her shoulder. "They need this," she said. He didn't argue. He knew. They rode out before the sun dipped low. No farewells, just silence in their wake. And behind them, the town kept on muttering. The kind of place that remembers sins longer than it forgives names. The wind had quieted that evening, the way it sometimes does after a long, bitter breath. Stars hung sharp and close overhead, and the cabin creaked with the familiar sounds of settling wood. The fire had gone down to coals, warm but low, casting long shadows along the floorboards. The children were asleep. Clara with her arms tucked beneath her chin, Tommy curled in tight, as if the world still meant to take something from him in the dark. He sat by the hearth, boots off, shirt sleeves rolled, elbows on knees. Eliza sat across from him, sewing a tear in Tommy's coat by lamplight. The silence wasn't awkward. It had grown between them like slow pine, sturdy and deep-rooted. Still, tonight it felt heavy. "I ain't much of a talker," he said, eyes on the embers. She didn't look up. "You ain't." He nodded once. Let the quiet hold a while. "I never figured on anyone else living in this place again. Built it for 3. Then lived in it alone." The needle moved steady in her hand. "I ain't asking for love," he said. "Ain't got the right. But if you're staying, if the children are staying, it ought to be clear." She paused, thread held between fingers, brow creased just a little. "I can offer what I got. The land, the roof, my name." He glanced at her then. Just enough to see her face, not enough to press it. No vows, no dresses, just, "What's mine is theirs, and yours, if you'll have it." The thread pulled through with a soft tug. She tied it off, slow, thoughtful. "I didn't come here looking to be saved," she said. "I know. And I ain't the kind to be owned. I wouldn't know how." The lamp flickered low, casting her face half in shadow. She set the coat down gently and folded her hands in her lap. "I don't know yet," she said, "but I ain't leaving. That's all I can say." He nodded once. No smile, no relief. Just a quiet understanding, thick as blood, so fate as earth. Outside, the wind picked up again. This time it only passed by. The years didn't arrive all at once. They came like river water, slow at first, then all of a sudden the banks are different, and the sky's gone soft with age. Spring brought wildflowers that Eliza taught Clara the names of, kneeling in the dirt with the girl beside her, their hands both stained with pollen and roots. Clara rode the mare now, bareback most days, reins loose, legs steady. She laughed in the open fields like she'd never run from anything, like the mountain was her birthright. Tommy got older without much noise. He took to fixing things, the gate hinge, the stovepipe, a cracked window pane. He'd sit by the fire with a whittling knife and shape scraps of wood into birds, horses, tiny men with wide hats and bent backs. They lined the mantel one by one, a quiet army standing watch. The man, he never did call himself father, but the boy never stopped coming to him when something broke. He taught Tommy to read from a half-burned Bible and an almanac from 72. Told him stories without flair, just the plain bones of how things happened. Not all of them had happy endings. He and Eliza never spoke of vows, but their days settled into a rhythm that held fast. She'd leave her boots by the door. He'd make coffee in the mornings and pour hers first. At supper, he carved her share of meat without asking. When the roof leaked, she climbed up with him and hammered shingles like she'd been born with a hammer in her hand. One winter night she touched his arm by the fire, just laid her hand there. He didn't move, didn't need to. They carved their name into a cedar plank above the door. L. Hart. That was enough. No first names, no date, just carved deep so the weather wouldn't take it. A photographer passed through in the fall, took their picture, Clara on horseback, Tommy with his woo, Odin carvings, Eliza in her threadbare shawl, standing next to the man whose name nobody said much anymore. He'd changed. Not all at once. But the scars didn't ache like they used to, and the silence had turned companion instead of curse. When he stood on the ridge come spring and looked out across the land, he saw furrows planted, smoke from the chimney, laughter rolling off the porch. Not ghosts, not exile. Just life, plain and steady, hard-earned, and his. Snow fell light that morning. Not the kind that howls or blinds, just soft, easy flakes, drifting down like ash from an old fire. The mountain stood quiet, trees bare, creek frozen thin, the land sleeping deep. The cabin was still. Smoke curled from the chimney, slow and lazy. Inside, Eliza stirred the pot over the stove. Tommy chopped wood out back, stronger now, shoulders broad like the man who raised him. Clara braided her hair near the hearth, her eyes fixed on the horizon through the window. He stood on the porch, coat pulled tight, hat low. Years had drawn lines into his face like the land draws lines in dry earth. Not hard, just true. His hands, calloused and sure, rested on the rail, and his eyes followed the wind as it moved through the trees. He didn't speak much anymore, didn't need to. What mattered was said in the way he walked the fence line every morning, or how he kept Clara's old drawings tucked in a box beneath the bed, or how he listened when the others spoke, even when they didn't know he was listening. A hawk passed overhead, wings stretched wide. The sky was pale and endless. Below, the house stood, weathered, sturdy, full. Inside, the children, no longer children, laughed at something Eliza had said. Her voice still carried warmth, even now, especially now. His breath fogged in the morning air. He closed his eyes, not from weariness, but peace, a peace earned, not given. And somewhere, from the hush of snow and trees and wind, the words came, not out loud, but sure as anything carved in stone. He thought he was rescuing Tam, Hem from the storm, but it turned out they'd rescued him. The snow kept falling, just weather now, nothing more.